Welcome to ElijahStreams with your host, Steve Schultz, president and founder of Elijah List Ministries. Stay tuned for another exciting show where you'll see the many ways God is interrupting your world, your nation, and your family to release His blessings and decisions on the earth. Watch today as another prophetic voice speaks to you with fresh revelation from heaven. And now, sit back and enjoy ElijahStreams.
Welcome to ElijahStreams. I'm your host, Steve Schultz. We've had an amazing time on location here in Albany, Oregon at our prophetic conference called What is Heaven Planning for 2020? Today we have a very special show for you, and I know you'll be greatly impacted by this family. Let's welcome our next guest, co-founder of Restore 7 Ministries, Elizabeth Enlow, and Johnny and Elizabeth daughter, newly crowned Miss Tennessee USA, Justice Enlow. So Justice, nice to meet you. Nice to have you here. And Elizabeth, nice to have you back here.
Good to be back.
I'm very excited about this because a year ago at this same weekend, we were talking about Justice running for, well, I guess you were competing in California at that time.
Yeah.
I want to jump into that story, but before I get ahead of myself, Elizabeth, let's start with Justice's name. How in the world did you come up with the name Justice, and why? And how does that play into the story?
Well, being married to Johnny Enlow is part of that story. Everything is prophetic in our world. And when we were pregnant with Justice, the Lord just spoke to us a lot about His justice and some things that were happening in our personal lives. He was teaching us about the fact that our hope is in His justice, and His justice is bringing things back into right standing with Him. So when she was born, it was just clear that that's what her name was, and God's confirmed it so many times since then. Just her name really has been like a prophetic timetable for so much that's happened around us.
So Justice, have you always liked the name Justice? Has it given you any problems or opened any doors? Tell me about that.
Yeah, I've actually loved being named Justice.
Good.
I'm a typical middle child, so I like having things unusual about me. And I always get asked if my parents are hippies when I tell people my name, my sister's names. So that's a fun conversation. Like, no, my parents are not hippies. They're just Christians.
That's really good. Now, Justice, you had some health issues leading up to the. When did this happen? What's your story with that?
I really started having issues probably around 14 or 15 years old, but I didn't realize that that was what was going on. Okay. And until I ended up in the hospital once in the middle of competing in a pageant, actually had to leave in the middle of the competition and go to the ER, and I was admitted for 3 days, and I just had severe abdominal pain, and the doctors were not able to figure out what was causing the pain. So they sent me home with pain medicine and no answers. And so I spent the next several months, having this pain keep happening and doing a lot of research, and just praying and asking God to help me find answers. And so we ended up finding answers, figuring out that I had endometriosis, and because of that was able to see a specialist.
Okay. Did it occur to you, or did it come to you that maybe God was saying, I'm not supposed to be doing this? Did you struggle with that, or were you able to compartmentalize that at all and just say, this is not God doing anything?
I haven't thought about that since the pageant, but actually I was wondering. I was like, is this a sign? Am I not supposed to be doing this? And then I really felt like it was actually just confirmation that I was doing the right thing. Competing in pageants was something that I had to pray about a lot before I started doing it. It's something that I think a lot of Christians I knew would have a problem with.
You had said off the camera that you had kind of wanted to be in pageants, but the impression that I got was you were not necessarily feeling called by God. It was just something you wanted to do. So how did that progress? How did you come into that then? How did you decide?
Yeah. I think the reason I even knew what pageants were was because my mom, when she was in college, competed in some university pageant. And so I had this picture of her when I was a kid that I would see of her being crowned. And that was kind of my only context of pageants. And throughout high school, my parents would call me Miss America as a joke, and I always liked it.
And why did you do that? Were you seeing the pageant in her? Was she conducting herself like a pageant queen?
No, I really, raising 4 daughters, I just never thought of any of them competing in a pageant. It wasn't something that we raised them to do or not to do. It just wasn't really on our radar. But I don't know why we called you Miss America.
I think it's just like I think that's just like a pet name that people use for their daughters a lot, because I've had other friends who their parents said the same thing, but I like took that on and I was like, I could be Miss America.
Well, speaking prophetically, and you know, all of us, I know you well enough to know that we think a lot of the words that come out of our mouth is very important.
Yeah.
I know you feel that way. That must be a little bit of a surprise to hear that your fun title for her ended up feeding into her actual destiny.
It's true. Yeah.
Do you look back and go, God just must have given me that name for her?
I guess so. I mean, we've known that there's a tremendous call on her life and that she was called to carry a lot of influence. We believe that about each of our kids. And it was just a matter of, you know, helping her discover what does that look like. And kids go through so many different phases where I remember at one point you wanted to be president.
For a long time.
All her sisters all said, we're going to move to another country if you're president.
Were you serious? Did you really believe that for a while, that you really wanted to? That's really good.
Probably from like 10 years old until 18 or 19. I even majored in government in my freshman year of college.
With that in mind?
With that in mind.
Wow.
And then I was like realizing I wasn't as serious as I thought.
Yeah.
When we started having to do internships, I was like, I don't think I want to do this.
This is not what you're looking for.
No.
Elizabeth, I had written down here a question about how you watched her grow into her destiny. What kind of things would you talk about as what did you see begin to happen that was showing her destiny?
You know, there's not like one moment, but more than anything, I just saw her continue to choose God and choose to believe that He was for her and not against her, and saw her wrestle with her own faith and her own relationship with God. And it's hard to watch your kids do that and own their own faith, because you so want to protect them from pain. And through the sickness that she went through, I mean, it was really, really intense for quite a few years. I think that just believing in them and knowing that there's a call on every one of our lives, so it's just the patience to watch them process that through with God. And some of us are early bloomers, some of us are late bloomers, and you know, she tried lots of different things that were not it. And I'm sure there are lots of things she's never thought of even right now at this point in her life that God's going to have her step into at some point. So this is just kind of the next part of her journey.
It's fascinating. It's just fascinating. When we come back, I want to hear a lot more of this story, so we'll be right back.
Log on to ElijahStreams.com now to order What is Heaven Planning for 2020. Astounding is what people are saying about our recent Elijah List 2020 conference. People couldn't wait to hear from Katie Souza. Get ready to receive healing, overcome defeat, and walk in victory. From Elizabeth and Johnny Enlow, you'll learn to think big picture and take your position of authority. Through our founder, Steve Schultz, find out how God prepares you for greatness in every process of life. Steve Swanson shares how you too can encounter God and get ready for the new sound He wants to release on the earth. Jaw-dropping prophetic insight from Dr. Lance Wallnau as he shares God's plans for the USA and the nations of the earth. You can order this 8-session bundle in 4 different ways: a DVD video set for $69, an audio CD set for $55, an MP3 audio download set for $39, or our best value, a USB drive which has both audio and video files and is yours for just $69. You won't want to miss out. Log on to ElijahStreams.com to order our What is Heaven Planning for 2020 conference set. Ask for this special offer number 2020. Call or write today.
Hey, we're back here with Justice Enlow and her mother, Elizabeth Enlow, and your husband, Johnny Enlow, sitting off there making faces over there. So, well, we want to pick up, we talked off camera about some of the struggles in faith, and describe what you've gone through, really as early as you want to talk about it, in your faith walk with the Lord.
Yeah.
And then I do want to say that we want to pick up a little bit more about the endometrius faith walk that you went through as well. So
leading up to me kind of competing in pageants, I didn't really think of it as an option, seriously, because I really battled with a lot of insecurity and self-hatred, probably from like 12 or 13,
Really?
throughout college.
Self-hatred that's a strong one.
Yeah.
Did something happen, or you just found yourself that way?
I think it's a combination of my personality and my understanding of, I grew up in a homeschool community, so my parents were not religious, but a lot of my friends that I grew up around were, and I tend to go the more religious route. Some people tend to go more rebellious when they're under pressure, and I tend to go more religious.
When you say religious, Justice, are you talking about religious in the sense of nice and spiritual, or are you talking about religious in a sort of a negative?
In a negative context,
Okay.
definitely. Feeling like I needed to perform for God's love, feeling like I
Okay.
needed to attain perfection in order to be worthy of His grace. And so for years, that was kind of my attitude, was I need to, do X, Y, and Z to be good enough to be a good Christian.
Sounds like you're listing the rules that you needed to keep, and the
Yeah.
things you needed to do, and how much time in the Lord, in the Word, and that.
All of those things, yes. And so that really fed into this whole identity crisis, really, of me just feeling like I wasn't worthy, and like just lacking confidence completely, and feeling like having confidence would have been having pride, which is totally different. And so I actually ended up going to ministry school in the middle of college. I dropped out of school. I was really having a hard time, and because of all of this insecurity.
Right.
And so I went to BSSM first year, and while I was there,
Now, tell me what SSM is.
BSSM is Bethel's School of Ministry in
Okay.
Redding, California.
Okay.
And I really went after all of this insecurity stuff. It's not what I thought I was going to be dealing with in my first year experience, but my friends were like, Justice, this is what you have to go after, because we see that you're amazing. God sees that you're amazing, and you don't see it.
And to clarify, when you said self-hatred, it was just very strong. Justice, I just want to delve into that just a tiny bit more. Do you mean you literally hated yourself?
There were parts of myself that I literally hated. There were things that I thought were just innately evil things.
Really?
And it's like they're ridiculous things. Looking back, I'm like, oh my gosh, I was just being a human being. But yeah, I was very, very hard on myself about everything.
And can I ask you, Elizabeth, were you seeing, as the mother, were you seeing these same things, or was she struggling by hiding it, so to speak?
No.
You saw it. You saw it.
Yeah, I mean, we've been really close through the years. So
Yeah.
she would call and share with us what she was struggling with, and we would cry together, pray together, speak the
Yeah.
truth to her, try to tell her what to do or not to do, and ultimately they have to wrestle it through with the
Right.
Lord.
Well, it's really important. I'm really actually enjoying this part of it, because people watching this are seeing it totally put together. Miss Tennessee, USA, right? Is I saying that right?
Yes,
Miss
yeah, you got it.
And yet here they are watching you say, I struggled with hating myself.
Yeah.
Is there anything you wanted to list of what it was just being human that caused you to hate yourself?
That's a great question. I think it was just, there were many things, just if I felt like I hadn't been 100% honest in a situation, like over the top honest, it would tear me apart.
Really?
If I felt like, I don't even know.
And
if
that was
I
kind
had
of a
been,
keeping the rules thing. If you
Yeah,
went
everything was-
110%
yeah.
honest, exactly how you felt without any
Yes.
hidden thing, now you're not keeping the law,
Yes.
the rules.
Yeah. It was very over the top. And it was hard for me to have friends because of this. And it resulted in me being kind of a tattletale with my sisters. I'm sorry to them.
And in a nutshell, how did the Bethel school, what kind of things did they do to help you in that area?
I remember one day I forgot to swipe in. You're supposed to like swipe your ID card when you get to school. And I had been there on time, but I forgot to swipe my card to let them know I was on time. So I went to my mentor and I was like, I'm so sorry, I forgot to swipe in. Can you mark that I'm here, because you're seeing me, I'm here. And she was like, oh yeah, totally no problem. And I was like, thank you, this was like tearing me apart.
Wow.
And she was like, it was tearing you apart? And I was
And
like,
you were serious.
Yeah, I was serious.
Wow.
And she was like, I'm not marking you here. And I was like, what? And she was like, no, you need to get over this. Like, this is a perfectionist thing. And so she like picked up on it really fast, and then started noticing it in other areas of my life that I hadn't really seen before. Because I think perfectionism in Christians is often like excused as people just behaving righteously, but it's not motivated from the same place, and it's not, you're not empowered by God's grace. You're being really controlled by fear.
How did you feel? Did you felt like you experienced, well, I guess I'll use the word deliverance, or how did you get delivered from, and I don't necessarily mean a deliverance, but how did you get delivered?
Yeah, I actually had like an encounter with God that really changed everything. But there was one night that I was hanging out with some of my friends, and just like the whole time was just really criticizing myself and feeling like nobody wanted to be around me, nobody wanted to hang out with me. And so I told them this afterwards, and they told me that I was crazy and that I needed to deal with insecurity. And so I remember praying at church the next day. I was just like, God, I don't know how to love myself. I don't know what that looks like. And I don't even know how to figure that out. So if you want me to learn, then you're going to have to teach me. And I ended up having this, just closing my eyes and having a sort of a vision of God just walking me through some different points in my life where a lie had come in that, my humanity was something that he didn't love about me, and showing me where he had been through all these different situations in my life, and showing that he loved every part of me, including the human part of me.
Awesome.
And
probably
so,
especially the human part of me.
yeah, exactly. And so that was really life-changing. And then on top of that, that same mentor that had kind of confronted this in me told me this strategy that, I don't know, somebody had taught her before, which was that every time she thought something negative about herself, to actually interrupt the thought and out loud in your head go, no, and say two things to yourself that are like positive, even if you don't believe it.
That's really good.
So that inner voice that had been a critic for a really long time became my biggest cheerleader, and that was a huge game changer for my life.
Wow.
And so that really set me up for being able to go into pageants having a healthy mindset instead of looking
you
for
found
identity.
yourself sort of after some length of time just kind of free. I don't think we ever get fully free, because it tries to come back, doesn't it?
Definitely.
It tries to come back, and then you have to start speaking the truth.
Yeah.
Right. When we come back, I want to explore the pageant and how you went from California to Tennessee, so we'll do that when we come back. All right, we'll be right back.
Log on to ElijahStreams.com now to order What is Heaven Planning for 2020. Astounding is what people are saying about our recent Elijah List 2020 conference. People couldn't wait to hear from Katie Souza. Get ready to receive healing, overcome defeat, and walk in victory. From Elizabeth and Johnny Enlow, you'll learn to think big picture and take your position of authority. Through our founder, Steve Schultz, find out how God prepares you for greatness in every process of life. Steve Swanson shares how you too can encounter God and get ready for the new sound He wants to release on the earth. Jaw-dropping prophetic insight from Dr. Lance Wallnau as he shares God's plans for the USA and the nations of the earth. You can order this 8-session bundle in 4 different ways. A DVD video set for $69, an audio CD set for $55, an MP3 audio download set for $39, or our best value, a USB drive which has both audio and video files and is yours for just $69. You won't want to miss out. Log on to ElijahStreams.com to order our What is Heaven Planning for 2020 conference set. Ask for this special offer number 2020. Call or write today.
Hey, we're back once again with Justice and Elizabeth Enlow. I've just really been having a good time watching and listening, because I know our viewers are going to get a lot out of this. I especially appreciate that you've been really forth-telling and vulnerable about what the struggles you went through. When we're done, I'd like later to have you pray for especially the young women that are watching this, but also men who have the same struggles. But Justice, what was the story that suddenly, at one time you were in California competing, and somehow you ended up in Tennessee? So how does that go?
My side of the story is that I was competing for Miss California USA last January, actually, and the night that I didn't win, so I was feeling pretty down.
You did get top 15.
I got top 15, which is really good in California.
Yeah,
it's a big competition there.
Yeah.
So I was out of 70 women, but I had really been hoping for top 5, and of course I wanted to win. So I was feeling a little bit down, but also just feeling like just the peace of the Lord on it at the same time.
Good.
And we went out to dinner afterwards, and I remember my parents said something in the car about moving. And I was like, what? Just so blindsided because I just was competing for Miss California. So I'm thinking like, we're going to be in California. But again, I just felt a peace about it. And so the next part of the story really has more to do with you and Dad. Because ultimately the reason that I moved with them was because I felt like the Holy Spirit was like, go with them.
And if I could, let me just interject here, because off camera, Johnny was telling me earlier when we did a show with him that he had concluded that if she didn't win, of course he wanted to win. If he didn't win, he would take that as a sign that God was directing him towards this other place. Is that your story as well? Since I've just popped it on you?
That's definitely part of it. My part of the story, we all have a part in it. My part of it was the first time that Johnny and I, in all of our marriage, 30-something years, where we asked God where he wanted us to be. And we weren't hearing any specific place, and we were thinking it was somewhere else in California, just another city.
Because you had felt called by the Lord to California, is that right?
Yes, we were there definitely on assignment.
Okay.
Every place we've ever lived, geographically, God's been very clear with us where he wanted us. But this time when we went to pray, I went to Johnny and I said, I feel like God asked me where I want to live. And he said, well, actually, I felt like he told me that you're supposed to get to decide where we live next. So it was a huge shift for us.
Now that's a husband.
Yeah.
That's a husband.
Well, I've followed his prophetic journey almost my whole life since I was 19, and we have lived in so many places and moved so many times, and every time it was very clear that God had us there. So I almost didn't know what to do with myself. The fact that God would give me permission to look in my heart and see what was the desire of my heart. And so my sister, one of my sisters lives in Nashville, so that was a quick thought. And as we processed that together and prayed through it, God confirmed that's where he wanted us.
And Justice, when you found out that they were going to move or that they wanted to move, did your mind immediately go to I'm going to compete for Miss Tennessee then? Tennessee
pretty
USA?
quickly, because this has been something I've been working towards for years, wanting to represent my state at Miss USA. And so when they said that, I also am like an optimist to the core, so I'm always looking for what can I be positive about with whatever's going on. So I was like, okay, this is going to be crazy and difficult to move across the country again. So what can I be positive about? And I remember sitting and asking God, am I supposed to go with them? And just hearing Miss Tennessee USA. And that was all I heard. And I heard it so clearly. And I was like, okay, this is what I was supposed to do.
So you mean you had the option at that point, because I haven't even asked you your exact age. You had the option to stay behind.
Yeah.
Okay.
I could have stayed behind. I'm 25, so
okay. Oh wow. Okay.
I probably should have moved out already, but
well, no,
still living
but
at home at that
that's
point.
fantastic.
In California, families stay together a lot
hard
longer.
to
I think it's pretty much that way across even in Oregon. It happened that way with one of ours.
And honestly, till a year or so ago, she was too ill to live on her own.
Wow.
Yeah.
Because that
ill.
endometriosis had really affected you for a significant period of time. Did God come through with some sort of healing, or did you just have to believe one day at a time? How did that?
Yeah, he really provided supernaturally through an amazing surgeon. And so sometimes I think he supernaturally heals us with a miracle, and sometimes I think he connects us with amazing medical care. And that's kind of what happened in my situation. And so we were praying for supernatural healing. And our doctors where we were living at the time were giving us no hope for what I was going through. And so we just spent a couple months continuing to pray and ask God what we were supposed to do. And we ended up finding this amazing surgeon who is the #1 in the world for, it's a really specialized surgery that only a few doctors even know how to do. And he was in California when we were in California. And so I was able to get on his books, and not only that, but God supernaturally provided the funds for that, because unfortunately insurance doesn't cover the cost of this surgery for endometriosis.
Wow.
So it was
just
crazy.
real quickly, we just have 2.5 minutes left. What's this that you started an organization now? It's in Tennessee called Justice for Women. What's that all about? I love the title, of course, because it's obviously a play on words and play on your name.
Yeah.
What is that all about, the organization?
Yeah, so for the last 2 years, I've been running an organization called Positive Period, which is focused on helping young women get diagnosed with endometriosis sooner and find surgeons in their area. But I wanted to go ahead and make it a 501c3 so that I could start getting donations and start a scholarship fund for other women who are wanting to get the same surgery that I had. But my passion is really more than just endometriosis. I'm passionate about women's issues in general and kind of expanding the modern definition of feminism. I feel like modern feminism has alienated a large group of women by not representing issues like endometriosis and infertility, polycystic ovarian, things like that, and kind of alienated women who choose to be mothers instead of having a traditional career.
Yeah, let me just ask that real quick, and I'd love to have you pray for these ladies, but how is it being a believer in this kind of a field, in the pageant area? Is it harder to be a believer? Is it easy to be a believer?
You know, I don't know any other way. So for me, it's easier because I just feel like it's audience of one thing. All I've got to do is just walk the path that I feel the Lord is setting before me, and that's it. And win or lose, I'm happy because I know I'm walking in obedience. I think it would be harder if my goal was just winning all the time.
Right.
So for me, I think it's easier to be a Christian doing this.
That's really good. That's very good to hear, because I might have thought it was somewhere else, something. Would you do me a favor, do us a favor, and look into the camera and pray for especially the young ladies who've heard your story and would like to have some of the healing, either the physical healing you referred to, or the healing such as being so hard on yourself. And, just pray
Definitely.
for them however you feel led.
Okay. Holy Spirit, I just ask that right now, every young woman and man who is listening to this, that you would come in and touch their heart, that you would reveal to them their immense worth, that they would let go of every false image that they've had of themselves, that the enemy has spoken over them, every lie, that it would just be broken, and that the truth of how amazing and incredible you've made each and every one of us would be what remains in their minds and in their hearts and in their spirits.
Yes, God.
And I just ask that for everyone who is called to do something like pageants, to do something in the public eye, that their identity would be firmly rooted in you first and foremost, and that they would be blessed on this journey with you, that they would see clearly the path that you've set before them, and that they would just walk in your peace and your identity.
Yes, God.
In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Well, I'm going to be following your career. It's going to be fun to watch and see what all. Thank you, Elizabeth.
Thank you
Justice,
so much for having me.
For coming, and hopefully maybe somewhere down the road, as far as this year, maybe we'll get another chance to sit down and see how it's going with you. That'd be awesome.
Hopefully she'll be Miss USA at
that's
that point.
Right. That's right. You are going to compete in
This
in
summer.
the Miss
Yes.
USA.
At some point this spring or summer, I'll be competing for Miss USA, so you can watch out. I don't remember what TV network it's going to be on.
So we really want to ask our viewers to remember to pray and intercede for that,
Yes.
because obviously that we want you to win. We're going to be watching with great interest to see your pageant and to see your career as it unfolds. Thank you, Elizabeth.
Thank
again
you
for
so
that.
much for having us.
Thank you. Well, that's our show for today. From what Elizabeth and Justice shared, know that God hears and answers your prayers over your children, your family, and your destiny. It's time for the justice of God to be poured out upon the earth and for the reformers to come forth. We'll see you next time in another exciting episode of ElijahStreams. Bye-bye.